for entertainment purposes only. And if you want true legal advice, contact your own lawyer.
This guy had in 2008, and you can go to our www.radiolawtalk.com, go to our podcast. We've talked about this for the past few weeks. In 2008, was basically found guilty and served some time.
He pled. He was being investigated and charged by the federal prosecutors in Miami,
yes,
or in Florida, and he pled to 2 state prostitution charges, and he served, I believe it was 16 months in state prison. So that was the deal that he worked out, and he was able to get a no prosecute agreement against certain of his friends that were around him that were also, co-conspirators or alleged to be co-conspirators. And that, he thought, okay, that happened in 2008. It's done. It's for what acts I did between 2002 and 2005. It's over, right?
Right.
But what did New York do? New York said, no, it's not over because you haven't been prosecuted federally yet. So we can come in now in New York State and federally prosecute you. And they arrested him on July 7th, I believe, of this year.
And this didn't just end in 2008, apparently. It went on past that, didn't it? Did he do other things also, they're alleging, or not?
One of the allegations was that he had to have a term of house arrest in Florida for the 2008, and the way they worked that was he would spend the nights in jail, but he was able to go to his place of business during the day. And the allegation is that at any given time, there were at least 3 females brought in for him to engage in sexual relations with while he was at the office. And so the question is, who was funneling the people in and getting that? And so it's just a nightmare.
Right. And now the coroner in New York actually found that he committed suicide.
Yeah, so what they found, Denise, is in detail is that he had taken bed sheets. So he was not on suicide watch. He was on suicide watch. Was not, then was not. And apparently, again, the rumors are flying, and there's allegations that his attorneys took him off suicide watch. It wasn't the jail or the Justice Department.
Or they had lobbied to get him off, and somebody agreed.
Right.
But yes.
And they agreed to take him off, and they found him, according to the coroner's report, strangulation. Not strangled, but he committed suicide by hanging himself, tying the bed sheets together around his neck. Now.
And broke a very important bone in the very front of his neck.
The hyoid bone, yes.
Yes, it's very hard to break that bone.
But Cal was bringing up another good point, though, and we're not doctors, but the older you get, the more brittle it is, so it might have been easier to break as an older man.
And this may have been his second attempt as well.
Yes, and the issue is, how does this all happen in jail? And a lot of people are still thinking, it's difficult to commit suicide in jail, and not only that, they're supposed to be watching him every 30 minutes, and supposedly they had signed off on it, and they have videos showing that the guards were not actually watching them at the time. So I don't know if it was just laziness or if it was someone that was kind of pushing some buttons. We're going to talk more about some interesting things in this Epstein case when we come back.
Go to the website, radiolawtalk.com. You can listen to the show there, and there's a lot of other good information, too. That's radiolawtalk.com.
So in the Epstein case, we're going to get into the civil trial that has just began, and we're going to discuss that in a minute, but we're still kind of setting this up. Todd and I, during the break, we're talking about a few interesting things about Epstein's death.
That's right. And so the medical examiner in New York has ruled that it was a suicide. But again, as we talked about, there are a couple things that are unique about it. I mean, first off, the hyoid bone, which is right around where the Adam's apple is, was broken, as well as they found other bones that were broken. My guess is that could have been the way he attempted suicide with the bed sheet. If he had several attempts to try to do that, that might have been responsible for how that happened. But as Fred was pointing out, the guards were supposed to be checking in on him every 30 minutes, and the indication now is they actually had fallen asleep. And when they found him dead, they went back and falsified their reports to the allegation is to make it look like they had gone, but video showed that they had not actually been looking in on him every 30 minutes like they were supposed to.
Isn't it interesting that as soon as this came out, the union came out and said, well, these guys are working overtime shifts. Well, yeah, you work overtime. That happens. I don't understand. But that was the first line of defense for their representative was, well, they're working overtime.
Yeah, and tired. That's what
so does that justify sleeping on the job? I'm confused by that. But secondly, there are various scenarios, if you really want to think about it, where a person could break the hyoid bone, even a 6-foot-tall guy, if he could jump from the bunk bed with enough pressure to put the snap on the neck, because that's how hanging kills people, is by breaking their neck. That's how it works. But
then that brings on the heart attack.
Precisely.
Yeah, and that's an important point, Denise, that you just raised there, which was a lot of terms are getting confused and thrown around. So the medical examiner determined that it was a suicide, and also determined that the suicide attempt started by the hanging or the hanging in the jail cell. But hanging, if you die by hanging, your cause of death would be a strangulation or something like that. Epstein actually died from a heart attack, which is when they found him hanging, they got him, they took him to the hospital. He had a heart attack, and the heart failure was what did him in. That's what killed him. Long and short of it, at this point, he's dead. And there's been a lot of speculation as to whether or not it was a murder or whether or not it was suicide. And the medical examiner the coroner has ruled that it was a suicide. I found it kind of interesting in one report that I read with regard to this, when they're talking about the Epstein case, and the commenter said, if this report from the Wall Street Journal is accurate, it certainly begins to look like the person chiefly responsible for Jeffrey Epstein being dead is Jeffrey Epstein. And my thought was, well, if it wasn't a murder, isn't that a given?
But here's the question. I would really like to know, if this case were presented to you, Todd, Fred, Denise, would you say, just on the facts that you have or the information you have, murder, jail-assisted suicide, Epstein by himself, how would you call it?
I would say that he wanted to kill himself. That's what I would say. And it's to escape being in prison. He had already been in prison before, but he got out every work day. Right? He had to spend the nights and the weekends apparently in the jail.
And it was in a jail, not the prison anyway.
That's true. And now he's in hardcore federal prison. And he's probably the most notorious person in that prison. And he also alleged that he had been, kind of roughed up by some of the other, by one of his prison roommates.
Buddies, yes. Right.
And, that type of stuff. And I think he just said, hey, life's too short. Let's shorten my life.
It's going to get shorter.
I'm done.
Yeah.
I would agree with you. I would say that this is a suicide on his part, not assisted by anybody else. And I mean, look, if anything, maybe I could see a scenario where maybe he greases the skids to the guards to say, hey, if you guys look the other way, I'll do this, and there's an account with money. If that came to light, it wouldn't surprise me at all, but I don't think that it was a murder to keep him quiet for this reason. Usually in cases where people have information about somebody else, that information would come to light in some sort of trade. Right? So if you turn evidence against this person, then they can be prosecuted, and that's where it comes to light, and the person is silenced by murder or whatever to keep that from happening. After the outcry of the 2008 resolution, I find it hard to believe that any prosecuting entity, any state agency would touch reaching some sort of a quid pro quo deal with Epstein with a 10-foot cattle prod. It wasn't going to happen given what happened previously.
Political suicide.
Yeah, he might have had all the information in the world. He could not find, to put it in financial terms, somebody to buy that stock. That was not going to happen.
There were really high-powered persons that were kind of alleged to be unnamed co-conspirators. Wexner, one of his former best friends, some of the incidents were alleged to happen in his home. And then
it's all allegations.
These are allegations. I'm really clear. These are just allegations of co-conspirators. It's not actual. Yeah. But there's some rumors about Alan Dershowitz, a very famous lawyer, about Prince Andrew. about Donald Trump, and Bill Clinton. That's kind of a funny little, group.
Yeah, what, you
And
got a
then-
Democrat and a Republican.
Yeah, exactly. And then you've got the former New Mexico governor, Bill Richardson, and then you've also got the former U.S. Senator George Mitchell. All of those have had some allegations brought against them. They may not be true, but it
And
does
they've
bring this
denied
to the
them.
public,
Yeah.
and it does make this more important, because what are we trying to achieve? We're trying to get public officials who are corrupt.
So here's the thing that I want to say also on that issue. Don't forget, a guy like Epstein, a billionaire, he is walking around all circles. How many people has this guy touched their lives, or people have been involved? Thousands, tens of thousands, maybe 100,000. And for people, and now that this is a big deal, what kind of worries me about the immediate, I'm going to call it the immediacy news, Twitter, Instagram, immediate news, is that doesn't mean they're guilty just because they saw the guy. I go to functions everywhere, and Denise does, and Todd. I shake hands with people. I'm sitting with them at tables, and I deal with them. And later I find, that guy's kind of a weirdo or has done some bad things.
Or
But-
registered sex
Yeah,
offender.
and I don't know, and you don't know, or even that you've, showed up at a party where they were,
And talking about the immediacy, I'll give you an example. It's a case we covered here on Radio Law Talk. Kevin Spacey, right? When Kevin Spacey was first facing charges in Nantucket, that was front page, above the fold in newsprint, top headline in CNN, NBC, Fox News. Kevin Spacey charged in sexual assault. When the case was ultimately dismissed by the prosecutor after the preliminary hearing, when everything just went crazy and all the evidence dried up, that news was back page news. It was, on the second page of whatever Google hit. It didn't get any place. So the public was aware that he was being prosecuted. That's going to stick in people's mind. There's a whole bunch of people out there thinking now that he actually assaulted somebody in Nantucket, and they didn't even see that case was dismissed. And the same thing's true here.
Right.
It's the shock value of the association.
all the
Right.
people that are associated.
And speaking of association, the FBI right now today is out on his 7,000 or 8,000 acre Zorro ranch,
Right.
from where he planned to impregnate as many people as he could with his seed, to pass on his seed
You're
to the
talking about
world.
Epstein,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yes.
That's,
So this is the guy-
that's an
All the way back
allegation.
to-
I didn't hear about that
no,
one.
that was
No,
his deal.
that was his thing.
Yeah, it was his
Really?
thing. So,
Yes,
yeah.
he wanted to have as many children as he could possibly have.
Boy, that's a strange guy. I knew
Yeah.
he was strange, but I didn't hear about that one.
I think when we come back, we need to talk about the victims now and what the law is now to assist the victims.
All right, we'll be back.
No, you've got time.
We
Stretch,
still have
stretch,
time.
stretch.
I thought we were.
Yeah,
Stretch.
because we're talking about people who are fearful, and one of them was, I hope I pronounced this name right, Ghislaine Maxwell, who was an associate that people thought, she could be getting in trouble. Well, a lawsuit's now been filed against her.
And others.
And others identified as Jane Doe's 1 through 4,
Right.
but she is the one named in the lawsuit. And the primary allegation in this lawsuit is she is the one, among others, that would help to procure and groom these females for introduction to Epstein. Those are the allegations.
These teenagers.
These teenage girls.
females.
And the one that's bringing this lawsuit is Jennifer Arrows, and it's interesting, her story, and we're going to go over her story briefly and what she's saying happened and how this happened with Epstein, and not just her, she's just the tip of the iceberg according to the attorneys and according to others. So that's what we're going to get into when we get back. And Cal, I think you can just take us out. But it's interesting because she's been on NBC News with an exclusive talking about it. I've looked at it. I've read some stuff. And what a brave young lady, by the way. Miss Maxwell, which we talked about, she's 57 now approximately. Apparently she was the person that got this Jennifer Arrows involved with Mr. Epstein, and apparently this is what happened in New York near his townhome. Not her. What do you mean not her?
It was another
Go ahead,
person that did it, but Maxwell was involved
Right.
day to day, but not the one that
Right. No,
actually
correct.
got the girl, the
No,
victim.
that's Jennifer Arrows. It wasn't Miss Maxwell that was bringing her over. That was someone else. But
Yes.
but she apparently, according to Jennifer Arrows and her attorney, she was almost like the puppeteer, doing this, and that's what I'm trying to get
Yeah,
at.
exactly.
But that was a good clarification. So what
Yeah.
happens is she is in a school that is an arts school, and she wants to be an actress, and it's a very prestigious, apparently, art type school, not like painting art, but like the arts. Some gal came up and started talking to her and got to know her somehow, and in a long story short, got her to come meet Mr. Epstein. Her father, that is Jennifer Aros' father, had passed away previously, and
From cancer.
From cancer, and they kind of groomed her. I guess the whole issue is she was groomed. These are her allegations, by the way.
So the person that procured her actually said that your father wanted you to meet Mr. Epstein, and Mr. Epstein wants to help you because he understands that your father has died. So they actually use the death of the father in procuring this person, this woman, or at the time a teenager, and getting him hooked up with Epstein.
And by the way, these are allegations, and by the way, denied vehemently by the other side, which we haven't heard their side. So you remember that. Innocent until proven guilty. But she goes on the television and talks. She was only 14 and 15 at the time, and she came home with $300, and he'd give her $300. At first, it was just a meeting, and then she claims that, again, allegations claim that she was groomed, and then acts that occurred after that, but Todd.
And then she said she did not. After she was raped, she
left.
Not go back.
That's right.
Ever.
Which was smart. She did the.
Yes.
According to her allegations, she left. But Todd brought up a very interesting question during the break.
Yeah. So this was all alleged to happen when she was 13, 14 years old, and I had a 13-year-old daughter that was in a middle school. I picked her up every day from school, and I could tell you, if my daughter came home and said,
come home.
If I went to go pick her up and she wasn't there, or if I heard that somebody that I didn't know was meeting with my daughter and having coffee, and then arranging, meetings, and I might not even known about the meetings, but I do know my daughter's now coming home with $300 a pop, and having a little bit of money. My question is, who was there? Where were the parents to look
the mom,
at what's going on, or whoever, the mom, or if she remarried, I don't know, but where were the parents looking after this? I want to be clear here. I am not suggesting this or saying this in any way to provide a defense or to condone any of the actions by Maxwell, the Jane Does that are alleged here, or Epstein, or anybody. I'm not. My question is, where were the parents in this?
And I can answer that. Maybe she's a single mom, maybe she's not, but my mom would have been working 2 or 3 jobs just trying to support us because we had many children, and she always had to work 2 or 3 jobs. She never at one point was only working 1 job while I was a teenager or younger.
Now, let me tell you why I think that would hurt Maxwell and Epstein. Because if that is the case, if it was the case with Araz that a mom was a single mom, then it's even worse that not only are they preying on somebody whose father died tragically, but they're also going after somebody that they know is what we used to call, when I was a kid, a latchkey kid whose parents aren't there, and they're swooping in because they know there's no adult involvement.
Yes.
And when people are looking at, just as a public service announcement, when people are looking at what we can do in the future to protect our kids from this kind of behavior, because let me tell you, it doesn't take a billionaire to prey on a child, right? Anybody can do it, but what do you do? They are less likely to do that if parents are heavily involved in the lives of their children.
Do you remember last week when I asked about the statute of limitations and
Yes.
then whether or not they could actually sue the estate of Epstein, right? Well, there is an answer now. There was a New York law that was passed it was actually legislated in January and passed in February by the governor, and it is now the New York's Child Victims Act. And this is lengthening the statute of limitation and allowing for these types of claims to come back and be brought.
Criminally?
No, it's civilly.
So this does not allow for criminal prosecution based upon this, but it does expose perpetrators to civil liability.
Civil liability. And it's open now for anybody that of any age that has been abused as a child, 1 year now, they can bring the suit from
enactment.
No, from the enactment, which was February 28th of 2019.
My understanding is it was passed in February, but it went into effect 2 days ago.
Now that's true. It was actually signed into law in February, and then it's now become active. So they have 1 year to bring it, and it doesn't matter the age. It also had the impact of lengthening the statute of limitation to 5 years. That means anybody that 5 years from the act that they're complaining of, to 5 years later, anybody of any age up to 55 can bring that act. So now bring a lawsuit. So it's very interesting that happened, and the way this has happened and the timing of everything, because literally it was not enacted about Epstein. It was enacted for other victims, but now it's going to really impact the civil lawsuits against Epstein's estate and against the alleged co-conspirators.
In New York. We're talking New York. And actually, there's multiple young women that are accusing Maxwell of this, and so there's going to be more lawsuits coming down the pike and it's not only against Maxwell and the estate. Maxwell's his assistant we talked about, but there's other unnamed individuals that might be brought in.
I think it's a maid. I think it's a housekeeper, and then it was some kind of another assistant besides Maxwell.
Well, and so this was happening. Let's go back to 2008. Right? He's supposed to serve his jail time, but the allegation was while he was at work, because remember, he had to do the nights in jail, but then he was able to go to his place of business to work. Now, he's still under a form of arrest, which means he can't leave the place of business and go elsewhere. He's supposed to go from the jail to the office and then back to the jail at night, and yet the allegations are that there was a constant stream of girls going in Florida. Now, this is a New York case, but I'm just talking about the behavior of Epstein. How does he get that constant stream of individuals going to that office if he can't go out and procure them himself? He has to have surrogates out there doing essentially recruiting. And if he has a trusted group that he uses, it's not shocking that he would take that Florida group of actors and then use them up in New York. Fred.
Here's the interesting thing about this. Remember, in his plea agreement in 2007, 2008, I thought it was 2008, round numbers, his plea agreement did not include Miss Maxwell. So she did not, it named a number of his quote, co-conspirators, but she was not named in that agreement that for prosecution. So interesting that.
Oh, I thought she was.
No, it was not named in the agreement.
Wow.
Yeah. So the issue is.
So she has exposure.
She may have some exposure.
Yeah.
So not only does she maybe have some civil exposure, but maybe some criminal exposure, and we're going to follow this. But here's the interesting thing: who's got the money? They're going to follow the money. There's $1 billion sitting there that his heirs, and I don't know much about Epstein. Did he have children? Did he have a wife? I don't know. I'm not quite sure.
Well, according to Cal, he wanted to have a lot of children, but he never got around to it.
Wasn't for lack of trying, apparently.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But good job, yeah. But but I'm just wondering who those heirs are, and those heirs are going to be fighting for that money. It's not like $1 million, which is a lot of money. This is $1 billion with a B.
Actually, it turned out in his financial filings with the court, his net worth was more like $500 million when he actually had to file his documents. He had been fraudulently telling people he was a billionaire.
Oh,
so
wow.
He's a little less, but still more money than I got.
Go to the website, radiolawtalk.com. That's radiolawtalk.com.